Okay, good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining. Um, of course, tonight's class is in the merit of all the Jewish people, especially in the land of Israel, especially those in the front lines, those that need to be rescued, those that need to be healed, and we should have the coming of Mashiach now. Okay, if you would like to sponsor a class, of course, sponsorships are available. Please send us a message or reach out to us, and we will be happy to we will be happy for you to sponsor a class. Okay, let's get into it. This week on Monday was Rosh Chodesh Av, was the first day of the month of Av, which there's a few things we're going to talk about. Number one, it is the day of that we start a more serious mourning of the temple. Starting in the 3 weeks from the fast of the 17th of Tammuz through the 9th of Av, which is next Tuesday, Monday night Tuesday, is called the period of Bein HaMetzarim, between the 3 weeks between these two fasts, and we mourn the destruction of the temple. And the 9th of Av, the 1st of Av, we start to mourn in a more serious way. We don't eat meat, we don't drink wine except on Shabbat. We don't do dangerous things, and build expansions to our houses, and some people avoid swimming and different other things like that we avoid during this time, compared to just the general 3 weeks, which is more restrictions on music and haircutting. Now, so that's number one. The first day of Av on Monday represented that, and as well, it also is the yard site, the day of the passing of Aaron, the high priest, Aaron, the high priest, the brother of Moses. And let's get into that. How do we know it's the day of the passing of Aaron, of the high priest? The answer is it's in the Torah. Go to Numbers chapter 33, verses 38 and 39. Aaron, the high priest, ascended Mount Hor in English, and Hebrew, and died there in the 40th year of the children of Israel's exodus from Egypt in the 5th month. Now, the 5th month, we're counting the 5th month, counts from the month of Nisan, which would be the month of Av. On the 1st of the month, Aaron was 123 years old when he died on Mount Hor, on Hor. So we see the Torah says the first day of the 5th month is Rosh Chodesh Av. So we see here the Torah explicitly tells us the day of his passing. Now, the $1,000,000 question is why? Why is it important to know the day of the passing of Aaron? In fact, it is the only yard site, the only day of passing that is mentioned explicitly in the Torah. Not the passing of Aaron. We just said the passing of Aaron. Not the passing of Moses, not the passing of Miriam, not the passing of Abraham, Isaac, or Jacob. Okay, sorry about that. We clicked the wrong button and we got the wrong thing. Sorry about that. Okay, back into it. So we are discussing the passing of Aaron, which was on the first day of the month of Av. Again, it is the only yard site, the only day of passing mentioned in the Torah. No other day of passing is mentioned. Not Moses, not Miriam, not Abraham, Isaac, or Jacob. So the question is why? Now, it happens to be that we do have a tradition of these days, of when the day of the passing of Moses is. When is the day of the passing of Miriam? We know that Moses passed away on the 7th day of Adar. Miriam passed away on the 10th day of Nisan. But these are all things that are brought down in the Talmud and Midrashim. None of them are explicitly in the Torah. So why is Aaron the exception? Now, the answer can be found in Rashi. Rashi, when it says, after the passing of Aaron, Rashi comments, it says, and the whole community learned that Aaron had passed away, that he had expired, and all the Israelites mourned him for 30 days. So Rashi explains, why did it say all the Israelites? It does not say that by Moses, that all the Israelites mourned him. It says that the men mourned him. What's the difference? Why all the Israelites? So Rashi says both men and women mourned Aaron because he would pursue peace between people who were fighting and between husband and wife. He was the peacemaker of the community, so therefore he actually had a relationship with more people than Moses did. Moses was only had a relationship with people who was teaching Torah, which were primarily the men. So therefore, the whole place did not, the whole community, the entire children of Israel did not mourn him. Okay, so again, this is brought down in the Medrash of us, the Rabbi Nosson. He says, when two people were quarreling, Aaron would approach one and he would say, "My son, your friend is full of regret and tearing his clothing, saying, 'Woe is me! How can I raise my eyes and see my friend? I am ashamed, for I am at fault to him.' Aaron would sit with him until he had removed any feelings of animosity from his heart. Then he went to the other party, telling him the same thing until they too were free of animosity." So this is very unique that Aaron would make peace between people by telling them the other party regrets it, and that way he would get them to feel remove any bad feelings that they had. So now this is very unique to Aaron, that he does not have fights versus Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. On the contrary, right? They actually did have quarrels. Right? Abraham had a dispute with Nimrod, Isaac with Yishmael, Jacob with Esav. Right? Adam, Noah, they all had problems. They all had fights. They had disputes. Obviously, very important disputes. We're not saying that disputes were frivolous, but nonetheless, this idea of trying to make peace at all costs was specifically about Aaron. Now, if we say that this is so, therefore, it makes sense that since Aaron impacted the entire community, it makes sense that this was a yahrzeit, a day of passing that would be celebrated by and marked by the entire Jewish community. Therefore, the Torah has to tell us explicitly what day Aaron passed away, in order that we should be able to celebrate it as a community. And this, of course, is connected to this period of time that we're in. We mentioned the 9 days, starting from the first day of Av, which happens to be the yahrzeit of Aaron. Obviously, this is important that we recognize that it's not by divine providence. This is the day that starts this 9 day period is the yahrzeit of Aaron, who pursued peace and love of a fellow Jew. That this is the way that we rectify the destruction of the temple. The temple was destroyed because of baseless hatred. How do we improve that? Through baseless love. Okay, so now let's get into it a little more deeply, into this idea of Aaron. So if you look in this idea that Aaron was a peacemaker, is brought in Pirkei Avos, the Ethics of Our Fathers. It says, Hillel Omer, chapter 1, Mishnah 12, Hillel Omer, Hillel used to say, "Be the disciples of Aaron, loving peace, pursuing peace, loving the creatures, and bringing them closer to the Torah." So there's a couple questions that we have based on this idea. Number one, why is it important to tell us that Aaron was the one who loved peace and would pursue peace? Seemingly, this is something that it's obviously it's an important character trait, but there are many character traits born in Pirkei Avos that are not given a person to kind of look to a role model. That's number one. And number two is, why is this seemingly loving peace and pursuing peace is a mitzvah? Why would this be in the ethics of our fathers? We've discussed this in previous classes, that the ethics of our fathers are kind of above the letter of the law, right? That it's going above and beyond. So how is it possible to say being a peaceful person and pursuing peace, how is that above the letter of the law? Seemingly, that is the letter of the law. Okay, so we know that there's a verse in the Torah, just to give a proof to that. The Torah says, "Don't be like Korach." Right? Korach made division amongst the Jewish people. The entire Torah is given to make peace in the world. So why would it doesn't make sense that this would be something that is just unique to people who are extra pious. Now, in fact, we could go a little bit further in Tanya, the Alter Rebbe's magnum opus of Rabbi Shneur Zalman of Liadi, his Hasidic, the preeminent Hasidic work of Chabad Hasidic thought, he quotes this in chapter 32, and he says, "Be like he quotes this Mishnah, but he quotes it a little bit differently. Number one, he says, "Be of the disciples of." He says Hillel the elder used to say, instead of not just Hillel, Hillel the elder used to say, loving be like the disciples of Aaron, loving the creations. Loving peace, loving the creations to bring them close to the Torah. This usage, and he explains, this usage of the term creations in reference to humans, to human beings, means that even those who are far from God's Torah and His service, for which reason they are classified simply as creations, indicating that the fact that they are God's creations is their sole virtue. Even those one must attract with strong cords of love. Perhaps thereby one will be able, after all, to draw them close to the Torah and the service of God. Even if one fails in that aspect, he has not forfeited the merit of the mitzvah of neighborly love. Okay? So in other words, that if seemingly that Aaron is saying, according to this interpretation of the Mishnah, that why the word creations? Because that's the only thing that's good about them. There's nothing good about this guy. This guy has no good qualities except that God created him. Now, so the question is, another thing that is noticeable about the way the Alter Rebbe quotes this Mishnah is that he omitted, he omits the words pursuing peace. Okay? Why doesn't he just say, if his whole point is to bring out this idea about creations, right? So just omit that whole part of the Mishnah. He quotes part of it. He says, loving peace, etc. And then loves creations and brings them close to the Torah. Why not just say, loves creations and bring them close to the Torah? And then if you're going to, or bring the whole Mishnah. If you're going to quote part of it, say, loving peace and pursuing peace. Okay. I hope that makes sense. And so again, so we have two questions. Number one, why omit part of the Mishnah? And number two, why quote Hillel the elder while the Mishnah just says Hillel? Okay. Now the explanation is as follows. If we go to Avos to Rabbi Nassan, which we quoted previously about Aaron, it says about Aaron as follows. One should love. What does it mean to love peace? One should love peace between Jews, between every individual, as Aaron did. As the verse states, true teaching was in his mouth, and injustice was not found on his lips. In peace and equity, he went with me, and he brought many back from iniquity. Okay? So Rabbi Meir says, what does it mean that he brought many back from iniquity? What does that teach us? He says, it teaches us that when Aaron went on his way and met a wicked person, he would greet them. The next day, that person had an urge to sin. He told himself, woe is to me. How will I raise my eyes and see Aaron? I am ashamed that he greeted me. Thus, this individual stopped him from sinning. So, in other words, Aaron's loving ways of being closer to people, of being closer to every Jew, even somebody who was a sinner, essentially, would actually bring people closer to Torah. Because they would say, I'm a person that Aaron went out of his way to greet me, and now I'm going to sin? God forbid. So we see here that when it comes to when the Mishnah tells us, it says, be of the school of Aaron. So that's the first thing, right? Be of the students of Aaron. Not just it doesn't say, Aaron did some nice things, or Aaron follow the path of Aaron. What does it mean to be a student of Aaron? So there are two ways. You could be a student of Moses, you could be a student of Aaron. Moses' idea is, Moses obviously is the one who has taught us the Torah. And the Torah tells us that sometimes a person who is wicked, a person is not obligated to engage with them. Right? So therefore, Moses did not have a relationship with every Jew, as we mentioned earlier. Aaron, however, acted in a way that was beyond the letter of the law. Right? That Aaron is saying, being a student of Aaron is beyond letter of the law, because he went over to people who were just creations, and they were wicked people, but he impacted more people to the point that the entire Jewish people stopped for 30 days to mourn Aaron. So the question, so in other words, Aaron, this being a student of Aaron is above the letter of the law. Making peace with somebody, being peaceful people who, in and of themselves, have nothing good about them, and then using that to that itself is a way to bring them closer. Now, the next thing, the next part is that he says about Hillel. So there were multiple people throughout Jewish at that era of history whose names were Hillel. I think many of them were his descendants. When it comes to Hillel the Elder, it's referring to the great Hillel, who was part of the chain of Jewish tradition, who was a colleague of Shammai, who was the one of the Jewish leaders. At that time, it was called the Zugos. They had two Jewish leaders. There was the Nasi and the Av Beis Din, and which means there was the leader of the Jewish people, and there was the leader of the court. And Hillel was the Jewish leader, and his colleague Shammai was the Av Beis Din, the leader of the Jewish court. So we have a couple stories in the Talmud about Hillel and Shammai and the differences between them, and this we're going to see why it's important to emphasize who Hillel was. Okay, so here was the story. The story was, there was once a Gentile who was passing by a study hall, and he heard the teacher explaining about the Kohen Gadol, about the high priest. And he hears them explaining there's a breastplate and the ephod and all these beautiful garments that the Kohen Gadol would wear. So he asked the students, this Gentile who's walking by, he says, who wears these garments? They said it's the high priest. So he says, I'm going to go convert to Judaism so I could be the high priest. So he came before Shammai, and he says to Shammai, who is again the head of the court, and he says, please convert me to Judaism, but I have one condition. What's the condition? I become the high priest. The Shammai took his measuring stick, and he chased him out. He said, that's ridiculous. Of course, we all know who could be a high priest? Only someone who is a descendant of Aaron, right? Only a person who's descendant of Aaron could be a priest, and out of the priests, you have to be the greatest among them. In fact, if the high priest, for whatever reason, is not even the wealthiest, all the priests chip in to make sure that he is the wealthiest among them. He has to be a special holy person and be worthy, and he could be the high priest. So obviously a person who converts to Judaism, while is 100% a Jewish person, cannot be a high priest. Most Jews can't be a priest. And for sure, cannot be the high priest. So Shammai seemingly makes sense. The guy has conditions, can't fulfill the conditions. He threw him out. He goes to Hillel. And he says, he goes to Hillel and he says, it is not the way of the world that the only one who knows the protocols of royalty is appointed king. Go and learn the royal protocols by engaging in the study of Torah. So he says to him, essentially, you want to know, you have to study. You study the Torah and come back to me and you'll see. Then you'll know if you could be the high priest or not, or what you need to know to be the high priest. He went and studied the Torah. When he reached the verse which says, and the common man that draws near shall be put to death, in Numbers chapter 1, verse 51, the converse spoke to Hillel. With regard to whom is the verse speaking? Hillel said to him, even with regards to King David, meaning in other words, even if King David were to become the high priest, he would be put to death, because King David was a descendant of Judah. He was not a descendant of Aaron. So he said to himself, if the Jewish people are called God's children, and due to the love that God loved them, he called them, Israel is my son, my firstborn. Nevertheless, it is written about them, and the common man that draws near shall be put to death, a mere convert who came without merit, with nothing more than his staff and traveling bag, all the more so that this applies to him as well. So the convert, so in other words, he recognized in his own that obviously he cannot become the high priest. The convert came before Shammai and told him that he retracts his demand to appoint him high priest, saying, am I at all worthy to be high priest? Is it not written in the Torah, and the common man that draws near shall be put to death? He came before Hillel and said to him, Hillel, the patient, may blessings rest upon your head as you brought me under the wings of the divine presence. So we see here that Hillel, by his patience with this person, this person had to study the entire Torah in order to understand that he could not become the high priest. But even though instead of pushing him away, he brought this person and he was able to become Jewish, which is tremendous merit. So therefore, we see here that we can understand now a little bit why it was important for the Alter Rebbe in Tanya to, first of all, make sure we know exactly who he's talking about. We're talking about Hillel the elder, and why he omitted the part about pursuing peace. Why does he omit the part about pursuing peace? Because it isn't relevant to the context, right? He does recite, "Be the disciples of Aaron, who drew the wicked close," because this is the point, that right, that be a student of Aaron who loves peace. In that way, you'll be able to draw people close. But pursuing peace is not necessarily what the context is here. We're not pursuing peace, like we said earlier, is when Aaron would go and talk to people and make peace between husband and wife and people who were quarreling. That is not relevant to what we're talking about here. But being a student of Aaron who loves peace, that is directly relevant to bringing somebody closer to Judaism and somebody closer to God. And how much more so, how it's important that we understand exactly who this Hillel was. Like we said, there were many Hillels, but we have to understand that we're talking about Hillel Hazaken, Hillel the elder, in contrast to Shammai. Now, by the way, Shammai was not a bad person. He was also very righteous. And in other places, it's explained that he used this construction, a builder's measuring stick, in order to chase this person out, which essentially his message to him was, go build yourself up, right? So he was empowering him too. Maybe we'll talk about that idea in more length in another time. But what we see here, but for us, we're not Shammai. Our job is to be like Hillel and to follow the way of Hillel, which is through peace and through bringing people closer, we can actually be more effective through in a peaceful way, in a more loving way. We could be very effective in bringing people closer to Judaism. We're running a little late, so I'm not gonna. We could tell story after story after story about how people who were brought closer to Judaism through loving and kindness, etc. But the point is that this is the way that we have to follow. This is what the Mishnah is teaching us. The Mishnah is teaching us that, and this is what the yahrzeit of Aaron, which was earlier this week, teaches us, and what we have to do, and specifically in these times when we're mourning the destruction of the temple, which was destroyed because of basis hatred, is that specifically through in a peaceful way of encouraging people and being positive, that in and of itself is a way to bring people closer to Judaism and make sure that that together we can bring Mashiach through loving every single Jew. Thank you very much for joining. Excuse me, I'm sorry about the technical difficulties in the beginning. If you have any questions or comments, leave it in the comment section. And God willing, we will see you next week.